In the years following the breakup of the United States, North America had become a fractured and volatile landscape. Tensions between the newly formed nations and their northern neighbor, Canada, had been simmering for months. Territorial disputes over resource-rich areas, economic competition, and stark ideological differences fueled the animosity. The most aggressive of the new American nations, the Republic of Texas, led by its first president Hector Ramirez, was eager to expand its influence and secure more territory. Prime Minister Aidan Murphy of Canada, a resolute leader with a background in military strategy, watched the developments with growing concern. Both sides bolstered their military presence along the border, and initial skirmishes erupted, leading to casualties and heightening the threat of a full-scale war. The situation reached a boiling point when President Ramirez, citing grievances over disputed territories and economic blockades, formally declared war on Canada. The declaration was broadcast with fiery rhetoric, framing the conflict as a fight for survival and expansion. In response, Canada immediately began mobilizing its military forces, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Scenes of soldiers boarding transports, tanks rolling through cities, and jets streaking across the skies became commonplace as both nations braced for the conflict. International reactions were swift, with many global powers expressing concern over the destabilization of North America. Some nations pledged support to Canada, viewing the aggression as an unjustified expansionist move by the Republic of Texas. The first clashes occurred along the contested border, with brutal battles unfolding in the dense forests and open plains. Canadian forces, well-trained and highly motivated, initially struggled to repel the Texan advances. The Republic of Texas, having invested heavily in its military, launched aggressive assaults supported by advanced artillery and air support. Scenes of aerial dogfights, naval skirmishes in the Great Lakes, and intense ground combat depicted the war's ferocity. Cities near the border were turned into battlegrounds, with civilian populations caught in the crossfire. The high casualties and widespread destruction weighed heavily on both sides, but neither was willing to back down. Determined to defend their homeland, Canadian forces regrouped and launched a series of strategic counteroffensives. Utilizing their knowledge of the terrain and superior logistics, they began to push back the Texan forces. Canadian ingenuity shone through in surprise raids, effective use of technology, and cohesive military tactics. Prime Minister Murphy's calls for international assistance were answered, with allies providing military aid and intelligence support. Scenes of Canadian troops liberating occupied towns and reclaiming lost ground inspired a surge of national pride and unity. The international community's support bolstered Canada's resolve to continue fighting despite the heavy toll. Despite suffering significant losses in the early stages of the conflict, Canadian forces began to gain the upper hand. A pivotal battle near the city of Winnipeg saw Canadian troops, led by General Lisa Tremblay, decisively defeat a major Texan contingent. This victory marked a turning point, as Canadian forces launched a series of successful offensives, reclaiming lost lands and pushing deep into enemy territory. The Republic of Texas, facing mounting casualties and logistical nightmares, saw growing disillusionment and dissent among its ranks and civilian population. Scenes of deserted Texan soldiers, protests against the war, and the crumbling morale within the Republic painted a picture of an aggressor nation on the brink of collapse. The war reached its dramatic conclusion with a decisive Canadian victory in the heart of Texan territory. The fall of Houston, the new capital of the Republic of Texas, marked the end of significant hostilities. President Ramirez, facing insurmountable pressure, was forced to surrender and accept defeat. Scenes of jubilation erupted across Canada, with celebrations in cities and towns from coast to coast. The relief of victory was tempered by the somber acknowledgement of the war's devastating human cost. Memorials and services were held to honor those who had fallen, and efforts began to rebuild the war-torn regions. As the dust settled, reflections on the conflict emphasized the importance of peace and reconciliation. Prime Minister Murphy, addressing the nation, called for unity and the rebuilding of a stable and prosperous North America. The war had tested the limits of endurance and resilience, but it also highlighted the unbreakable spirit of those who fought for their homeland and the values they held dear.